Is there a lot of background voice that is happening?
Uh, eh,
How do I bring my PPT file, Shiva? Can you guide me again?
yes, ma'am. Just open the file like how you open in your system.
From just one moment. Yeah, it's there on my desktop, but how do I put it on?
Uh, just operate it just like the way how you operate your system, and that's all. Or you just
Achha, just open it. Okay, sorry.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
all.
you had told me. I remember. Okay, just one moment. Yeah,
We can see
are you
your
able?
desktop now. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, great. So today's session that I'm going to talk about is journalism during disasters and pandemic. It is a very topical issue right now. I'm sure even as we are with our smartphones, we are able to get news and we are able to get information, the relevant kind of information to be able to make decisions. And that is what journalism is all about. And in this time when everybody has to be careful, everybody has to take precaution, everybody has to practice social distancing. There are people on the front line, and journalists are considered frontliners. Yeah, so my PPT, my presentation, my talk would be sort of discussing what it requires, what does it mean for journalists to provide a public service at this time. So the typical first reaction, what happens when a disaster strikes? Whether a disaster is a natural disaster, think about the various floods that happen annually, or you think about man-made disasters. If there is a fire that has started somewhere, uh, all kinds of disasters. How do news organizations react to those disasters? The typical first reaction of news organizations and journalists to a crisis, man-made or natural, is to rush to break news of these events. And this is extremely important. It is important for citizens, for people to know what has happened. These are events with great relevance, with great impact, with big impact, and everybody is entitled to know what has happened in their vicinity. So why is it important that this reporting happens? Timely coverage acts as a vital information resource and puts the spotlight on state's response, thereby driving governments to provide adequate rescue and relief operations. So journalism, as many of you might be knowing, has a watchdog role. Keeps the powers that be, the people with political power, it keeps them on watch, and they're held accountable because there is journalism, and they are made their policies are supposed to be made transparent because there is so much of reporting, and that's why democracy is considered to be a thriving democracy where journalists are able to function freely. Michael Marcotte, a veteran journalist, now he's professor at the University of New Mexico. He has said something extremely interesting about news media covering disasters. What has he said? He has said news media are a vital information resource, telling what is happening where, who is affected, how things are changing, and why. It is a communication lifeline, saving lives by relaying critical information to and from affected parties. So the work of journalism is extremely important. Think about it. I mean, would we have known which hospitals are catering to COVID infections if not for our news media, right? How do we know where the lockdowns persist? How do we know which zones are containment zones, right? All of this information is available because journalism exists. So, at the time of disaster or a pandemic, the work of journalists is extremely useful to ordinary citizens. So, but there is something beyond breaking news. It's important to give information, and this information can be extremely useful. But there's something beyond breaking news that journalists need to keep in mind. Journalists need to prepare thoroughly for reporting on disasters and pandemics, but very importantly, they also need to go beyond daily reporting. So it's one thing to just keep giving information on how many people have been infected, how many are asymptomatic, how many hospital beds we have. These are important information, but it's also important to go beyond the act of just daily reporting, the act of filing spot news. Let me give an example of a man-made disaster that happened in 1984, more than 30 years ago. In 2014, 30 years after the industrial catastrophe, Mint, the newspaper Mint, it analyzed reports in English and Hindi newspapers in the first week of December 1984. Remember when the gas tragedy happened? It happened on the nights of 2nd and 3rd December, just past midnight. It took ordinary people, people who belong to very dispossessed and disempowered strata of society, it took them completely unaware, and it led to a whole lot of casualties. There are various estimates of how many people died because people were affected generations upon generations. But the death toll is considered to be around 2.5 lakh people. So many people died. This was 1984 when it happened. In 2014, Mint, the newspaper Mint, analyzed how the English news media covered this event. And some of their findings are, so the analysis of English news coverage of Bhopal shows us conservative estimates of death toll. In the first week of coverage, the death toll was pegged at 350 to 410 deaths. The Hindi newspapers, on the other hand, were much more accurate. They put it at 500 people. This is in the first week. Remember, this is the first week. And in the English news media, the leaking of the lethal gas from the Union Carbide plant in Bhopal, the factory that was responsible for the leaking of the the deadly gas, methyl isocyanate, that factory was Union Carbide. And how did the English news media cover the leaking of that gas? It just called it an unfortunate accident. When you use words like unfortunate, then you just hold, what do you hold responsible? You just hold destiny responsible, as if there were not players that were responsible for this massive, huge tragedy. So the English media narrative was the casualties were accidental, which means nobody gets blame on their head. And this was primarily the English news media's narrative. In fact, when Anderson was arrested, the Times of India editorial criticized that arrest and said that internationally that does not make us look good. This was in the first week of the Bhopal gas tragedy. So Vidya Krishnan, who wrote this report in the Mint in 2014, 30 years after the Bhopal gas tragedy, she says, truth is, while the Hindi media was asking the tough questions, the English media was being pliant stenographers. You know, the act of journalism is that you collect and assemble facts and information that is of relevance to ordinary citizens so that they are able to make good, important...
Thank you so much.
That was a sound. Have we muted participants, other participants? Shiva, are you able to hear me? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Everything is perfect.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Because I suddenly heard a burst of sound. That's why I was wondering if everything is okay. Okay. I'll resume my presentation. Yeah.
Sure, ma'am. Sure.
Vidya Krishnan, a senior journalist in the Mint, she said that truth is while the Hindi media was asking the tough questions, the English media was being blind stenographers. Now, as journalists, we are not only supposed to just take down, note down what people, with power, what the authorities. Journalism thrives on questioning. Journalism thrives on speaking truth to power. We are not supposed to be stenographers, but that's the assessment of the English news media in the immediate aftermath of the Bhopal gas tragedy. This was the first week after the Bhopal gas leak. And 30 years on, with what Vidya Krishnan says, 30 years on, what is clear is that the media failed Bhopal victims just as much as the judiciary and the government. Media created the narrative of this being an accident, whereas this was actually, a major crime against humanity. But this is how the media narrative went, and English media, which was considered, especially at that time, considered to have a lot of influence over, over policy, over the people in government, that did not really stand by the people of Bhopal. So one thing that is clear is that news media often react to the aftermath of a major calamity rather than function as a predictor. Now, this is extremely important. I mean, we've been, for example, if you do a Google search of the number of beds, the number of ventilators, the number of personal protection equipment, all these very necessary items that would help human life, that would save human life. If you do a Google search for India, you'd find the latest reports start coming in from March onwards, not earlier than that. Whereas the coronavirus had already hit different countries much earlier than that. So how is it that our national media was not asking these very relevant questions earlier on? That do we have adequate number of ICU beds? Do we have adequate number of PPEs? Do we have adequate number of ventilators? How come the coverage began only when it came to us, right? We became aware that this problem is going to get bigger. Yeah. So rather than reactive, to be proactive is something that the news media has to aim for. The news media and journalists, they need to question the government's preparedness well in advance, not just when an event strikes. That is very reactive. That is just something that you do for spot news, but much before that. That's important. So what does journalism need? It requires the understanding of more nuanced and politically complex questions raised by a crisis. So you don't just give the what, who, where, why, and how, the 5 Ws and an H, but you also raise questions that could affect policy making, that could question the existing policy decision making by the powers that be. So it's important that the journalists who are covering these issues, the journalists who are covering disasters and the health consequences of these disasters, they understand what they are covering, what this event is about, what this disaster is all about. And for that to happen, for journalists to ask relevant questions, they need to have the necessary scientific expertise and education to understand it. You see, very often what happens, very young journalists go to cover these very important events, these important trends, these important catastrophes, and they are not aware of the full implication of this of these events. Yeah, what needs to happen so that the journalists themselves are aware of the full significance of a certain disaster, of a certain event. For that to happen, media organizations and state and other agencies need to fund journalist training. We are really poor that way in terms of training of journalists. We do not pay attention. We do not really pay attention to what kind of expertise, what kind of sort of upgrading of skills journalists would need. Another aspect that is big when you're covering disasters and of course other kinds of news items also is the gendered nature of disasters. I mean, we say that disaster strikes everybody, but disasters do not strike everyone equally. There are people who are more vulnerable. So let's take the example of the 2004 tsunami, right? There was an Oxfam report. 2004 tsunami happened on 26th December 2004, and there was an Oxfam report a year later which clearly mentioned their findings were that women were disproportionately higher victims of the tsunami than men. Even in terms of the death toll, women died, more number of women died. If you remember senior journalist Praful Bidwai, the late senior journalist Praful Bidwai, he used to be an activist and he was a left-leaning scholar. And he mentioned something he said something extremely important. This is from a piece that he wrote in 2004 itself. He said, natural disasters are natural only in their causation. That's the only naturalness they have. So natural disasters are not socially neutral in their impact. Rather, they pick on the poor and the weak, who are far more vulnerable than the privileged and the well-provided. We can see that happening even in today's situation. We see that the lockdown is there to protect middle classes and the upper middle classes and the affluent group. But is it just as beneficial for people who do not have houses, who do not have homes, who have come away from their homes in search of livelihood? Is it just as beneficial to them? Is the lockdown just as good for them? What does it do to daily wages? Daily wages, by the very definition, means that somebody who has to earn their livelihood, their living every day to be able to eat, right? So indeed, natural disasters affect the poor, the dispossessed, in a more severe manner than they affect other people. Amu Joseph, a women's rights activist and journalist and author, she said something like this for an article that appeared in India Together. She said the fact is that gender, along with other socioeconomic variables such as class and caste, race or ethnicity, age, and health status, does influence people's experience of the events. So these are not neutral events. What kind of situation, what kind of context you find yourself in will decide how the event, how the disaster, how the pandemic affects you. Yeah. So if there is an elderly person without the support of anybody else, living all by themselves, of course the disaster is going to be extra severe for them. Yeah. What about people who do not have access to drinking water? They are likely to come from certain castes. They're likely to come from the poor sections of society. So this is something, these contexts, these socioeconomic factors need to be kept in mind if you're doing journalism. She also says, Amu Joseph also says, women have been appearing primarily, and she had sort of dissected and analyzed some of the reporting that happened after 2004 tsunami, and this is what she found as an heroine. The question is whether or not such limited representations do justice to women's experiences, concerns, and needs in the wake of the disaster. Is this the totality of the experience of different kinds of women? Even now, when we look at the images, the visuals that we see on different multimedia platforms, we see the primary, the people who are primarily sort of shown as victims are men on the move, and they do have families who are moving along with them. Yeah, but we don't get to see stories of women who have small shops, who have bundis selling tea or coffee, who have a small tailoring setup. We don't get to see stories of single women headed household. Yeah, it is a great invisibility, I would say. Yeah, so it's important to see women in all kinds of roles, and the economic role, their economic involvement is extremely important. That cannot be dismissed, that cannot be sidelined. By showing stories of women's economic involvement and challenges, the media could induce can propel the government to put them center stage in the decision making. I am reminded of something that another noted journalist and women's rights activist, Kalpana Sharma, had mentioned about something that she did to, she went to Ahmedabad in 1985 to cover the aftermath of another man-made disaster, which was a communal riot. And she said that while the assessment of what kind of economic damage had been done, men's livelihoods were taken into consideration, whereas women's, livelihoods in their own homes, their sewing machines being destroyed, that was not taken into account at all. So it's important to look at women also as drivers of economic activity. Now, in another important aspect that I would say is part of this pandemic is the role of the journalist. The journalist here is delivering stories, and the journalist is also part of the story. There are quite a few news that have come regarding them, about them. First, of course, we think of journalists doing an essential service. It is part of their frontline job. They are part of the frontliners, and indeed that is why they are allowed to be out there and doing their job, right? But there are these questions that every journalist asks. Is a journalist's job inherently unsafe? So when you take up journalism, you sort of tell yourself, okay, I've signed up for danger. Then it's nobody's fault if something happens to me. This is part and parcel of the work that I do. It is something to question. Journalists who join media organizations, news media outlets, they're fed with this kind of heroic understanding, heroic idea of this is journalism. And because you're doing the greater good for society, you're doing the greater good for country, you should be ready to, sacrifice your safety, your life, if possible. But this is something that one should question. Should journalists resign to this convenient idea that exposing themselves to danger is an occupational hazard? They should just say, what does this convenient myth kind of lead to? It just leads to the fact that the people who employ them and the state washes their hands of the responsibility of taking care of their employees, right? Every workplace has the responsibility of, practicing a certain number of, measures, taking a certain number of measures that keep their employees safe. But are journalists included in that kind of profession? And why not? If not, why not? So almost 100 journalists have tested positive for the virus. The latest report that I read on bbc.com by Shautik Biswas, this came out on May 4th, and it said almost 100 journalists countrywide have tested positive for virus. Most of the hotspots are in Mumbai, Chennai, and there is a certain section in Ludhiana. And of course, we do not know how many journalists have the virus because we have not been testing quite extensively. And many countries, many people across the country, they must be asymptomatic carriers. We do not know whether they do have or they do not have unless they get tested. But how is it that is causing such a high level of infection among journalists? Primarily, these journalists are TV news journalists and camera persons. And when the lockdown was announced, their editorial offices, their editorial bosses wanted them to get interesting visuals of the lockdown. And that's how they were kind of put in a situation of danger, situation of an unsafe situation. And in fact, some of them did not even take precautions, it seems. They did not wear masks. They probably did not wear gloves as is advised to journalists and healthcare professionals. Another thing that comes to mind when we are talking of contracting of COVID infection among journalists is that many news organizations, it's a very, very erratic and ad hoc kind of arrangement as to what can be given to journalists for protection. I know one news organization, news channel, in fact, in Delhi, it gives its reporters who are actually going out in the field two masks every day and a pair of gloves. Here in Hyderabad, quite a few news organizations expect their journalists, their employees to cater to their own needs. So one news publication asked the journalists, the employees, in-house employees, to buy kits presented by the state government, kits made by the prison inmates, consisting of hand sanitizer, consisting of masks and gloves and soap. These were the journalists were expected to buy these kits by their own money. So it's a very ad hoc, non, sort of mandatory requirement that the news organizations themselves are doing. There should have been a more rigorous kind of instruction from maybe MHRD or some other government body that some basic protection should be given to them, and it should not be left to employees themselves that they look after their own protection. Another major thing that is happening now are the layoffs. Journalists are finding that they are no longer employed. There is cost cutting happening. Ad revenue has gone down, so there is retrenchment and very cruel and systematic kind of retrenchment. So various working journalist unions across the country have asked these media moguls, these media bodies that make quite substantial profits, as to how is it that only the lower rung of the employees are having to face the act. Why is the this loss being incurred by everybody? For example, Times of India sort of fired a lot of its employees. I'm taking a quote from senior journalist Nona Walia. She used to write for the Sunday supplement of the Times of India, and she was shocked to get this message from her boss at the Sunday magazine of Times of India. She said the entire team of Sunday magazine of Times of India asked to leave. Got a call from my boss, Poonam Singh, sacked after 24 years from a company I served with love for more than two decades. Wow. So obviously she's in a state of shock. She posted this on her Facebook account. This is how media organizations are treating their employees, and Times of India is not the only one. Many organizations are asking their employees to go on leave without pay. The Quint has asked almost half of its employees to do that. The Quint has asked, then the Indian Express has asked, and they're all citing bad business. They're all saying this is going to be difficult. Layoffs are going to happen, and this is a worldwide phenomenon. But what working journalist unions are saying, that Prime Minister Modi himself had said that employers should not fire their employees, not at this time, and yet media organizations are doing just that. So journalism is an essential service. State and central governments, philanthropists, media network owners, and readers and viewers need to treat it like one. It's an essential service. Why? Because it strengthens democracy. It's an essential service because ordinary citizens are able to make more robust, stronger decisions about the living, about their lives, about the lives of their communities, about the kind of socio-economic decisions that they have to make. So this is an essential service that's absolutely crucial for the health of a democracy. But why is it not? I mean, just saying journalism is the fourth pillar of democracy. Journalism is an essential service. Journalism is very important for a democracy to function. That won't help. The state and central government, different sections of society, different important people, media network owners, media moguls, and readers and viewers like you and I have to treat it like an essential service. And that's why news media need adequate funding for it to continue working as the fourth pillar of democracy. Without revenue, without funding, news media cannot expect to thrive. And that's why there is also an urgent need for adequate workplace policy for the lives and safety of journalists to be taken seriously. This kind of, idea that journalists just sign up for a dangerous profession is erroneous, is wrong, is inaccurate, and people who are employing them, who are making profit on the work that is done by their employees, they need to take some responsibility about that. Thank you so much. I hope I was audible. Shiva and Dr. Seema, were you able to listen to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Anjali, ma'am, can you hear me now?
Who's that? Is that Shiva?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. This is Shiva. Yeah, can you hear me?
I'm able to hear you. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am, for the very informative session that you have shared with us. And I would like to just go with a small briefing of the entire session that Anjali ma'am has focused on.
Yes.
How ma'am has focused on issues regarding a Bhopal gas tragedy incident, which is actually a man-made one, how it was focused and how various regional and English, Hindi and the English media channels have written, and also on the casualties, how different kinds of reportings have done. And in that case, ma'am was focusing on how media had actually failed the Bhopal victims was clearly told by ma'am. It's also a term called major crime that was done against the humanity. And one important point what that ma'am is trying to focus is on how media should function as a predictor rather than a, a, a reactionary situation rather than just a react to the aftermath. There is also a very serious necessity of the media to question the preparedness of the government. It's not about just checking the with the government after the pandemic has come up, but it's very important for the journalists to actually question the preparedness of the government. And ma'am also thrown focus on how the nature of the disasters, natural or man-made disasters, how it especially affect the women, both in different kinds of socio-economic backgrounds. And ma'am is also focusing on the protection of the journalists, what kind of basic requirement of the basic protection for the journalists in the entire this pandemic. This corona pandemic, nearly around 100 journalists were tested positive. And she also focused on layoffs and cost cutting, and which is a kind of a worldwide phenomenon that is been happening. And ma'am is also addressing the issue how journalism must be treated like an essential service, and there is necessity of adequate workplace policy also. Thank you very much, ma'am, for the informative session that you have shared with us. And I open the session for a question and answer session. If in case you have participants have any questions to ask, you can kindly text in the chat box so that I can put your question to ma'am. Yeah. Here, Anjali ma'am, am I audible to you?
Yes, yes, you are.
There is a question from Ayesha. Ayesha is asking a question like, ma'am, what do you think about the recent gas leaks that have happened in Visakhapatnam or in
Shiva, your voice breaking.
just a second, ma'am.
Yeah,
Are you able to? Am I audible now?
ಪ್ರೊಸೀಜರ್ ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಲ್ಲ, ಆಯ್ತು ಮಾಡಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಪ್ರೊಸೀಜರ್ ಫಾಲೋ ಮಾಡಿ ಒಂದ್ ಲೆಟರ್ ಹಾಕ್ತಾರೆ ಅಷ್ಟೇ.
Hello, ma'am. Can you listen me now? Anjali, ma'am. Hello. Anjali, ma'am. Anjali ma'am, can you listen to me now?
Kind of difficult.
Yeah, I can listen you. Yeah. Hello. Am I
Anjali,
audible to you, ma'am?
I'm not able. Yeah.
Ayesha is there is a question for you, ma'am. Am I audible now?
Uh, I'm not able to listen to you, and I'm not able to even see my see the whole.
Just a second.
Yeah.
Am I audible now, ma'am?
Your voice is breaking.
Okay.
Now I think I can.
Is this fine now?
No, it's chopping
Is
up
it better?
in between.
ma'am, please close your screen, ma'am.
Huh?
You can stop sharing your screen, ma'am.
What? I'm not getting it.
You can stop sharing your screen.
Stop sharing.
Yeah, screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Now am I audible to you, ma'am? Now?
No. No.
Ma'am, you can put, ma'am, if you have earphones, you can put earphones.
Hello.
Ma'am, can you put earphones?
Hello. Hello.
Hello, ma'am. Can you
Yeah,
put,
please. Yeah.
can you put earphones, ma'am?
Yeah. Now I'm able to hear. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, Shiva, continue.
Yeah, ma'am. We have a question from the participants that Ayesha, one of the participants, is asking a question, asking you to address on the recent gas leaks that have happened in Visakhapatnam and one in Chhattisgarh, I guess.
Yes. So again, the lower rung, many people have sort of associated the leak that happened in Visakhapatnam to what happened in Bhopal. And indeed, all of these happenings, these events, these drastic events, they have a backstory. And it is the job of journalists to keep track of their beats properly, to be able to see whether, all safety standards are being met or not. Here also, a few news items indicated that only the lower rung of the workforce, the administrators were being held responsible for what happened in Visakhapatnam, and it's almost like human life is extremely cheap in our country, and that's why these safety standards are taken for granted. They are not strictly adhered to, and this is what happens again and again.
Okay. There is one more question for you, ma'am.
Yes.
Dr. Venumada will ask me a question like, what are the journalist ethics? Who is responsible to set them and enforce them?
Who's responsible for?
He is basically trying to ask the major question on the ethics of journalism. And who is responsible for the ethics of the journalists?
Yeah, so when news organizations, news channels, and newspapers and various news outlets stop running after, stop chasing TRPs and circulation figures, then I think ethics would be a slightly more achievable ideal. In fact, journalists are asked to tamper with the information that they bring sometimes. They're asked to go easy on critical stories of the government. So ethics is an ideal that that journalism in India especially has to look after. I mean, our revenue model is something that sort of makes news organizations act in this way, and it is in fact in a very strong way it's the journalist himself or herself who has to follow ethical practices, whether or not their own organization believes in it or not. It's up to the journalist, and if an organization has been known to be a credible one, to have done good work in the past, then it is likely that they would tell their own employees, their journalists, to act in a more ethical manner. But ethics are a gray field, and ethics are difficult to maintain if profit is what if profit is the most important driving force.
Okay, ma'am. We have one more question from Ariba Alvi. Can you listen to me, ma'am?
Yes, go on.
So the question is, ma'am, what do you have to say about the media bias these days? And there are hardly any channels which are left reporting as a neutral image of the situation.
I didn't get the second part of the question.
Question is, she is trying to tell that there are hardly any media channels which are actually being neutral while reporting. There is
Hardly
a
media channels that are
neutral.
ah, hmm.
And
So that,
most of, just a second, ma'am.
yeah, yeah.
Most of the things are looked on from a religious point of view, and the behavior of journalists towards their guests is quite disrespectful. What are your views on that? On it?
No, it is true that when journal in the early part of the century, journalism was supposed to harbor the ideals, the principles of objectivity, along with accuracy and fairness. Objectivity was a great ideal to aspire to not show bias towards any one group or any one party or any one individual. That was the great principle that journalists were asked to follow. But over time, many journalism scholars, many journalists, many practitioners have realized true objectivity is not possible. Everybody has views and everybody has a stand, everybody has a position. What would be more ethical would be to tell your viewer, to tell your reader that this is the position they have, and let the viewer know in a transparent way where that news organization, where that journalist stands vis-a-vis different political parties, vis-a-vis different political and economic situations. So it's not left to the reader, to the viewer to figure out which journalistic outlet, which news outlet holds what kind of position. And indeed, it's important that a lot of people sort of realize, a lot of readers realize, especially in South India, there are so many channels that everybody knows belongs to one political party or the other. Even news, dailies, newspapers, people are aware that they are affiliated with certain parties. So one senior journalist, I remember, I had this conversation with this senior journalist, and he was saying what people who are genuinely interested in news, who keep track of news, they do not consume news coming from only one news outlet. They actually go through a number of publications and then arrive at their own conclusion. So it's important. It's a responsibility that has been passed on to the reader and the viewer also, to be aware and to be critical.
Okay, ma'am. There is one more question from Sri Teja Kallapu. The question is, there are journalists like Siddharth Vadrajan of The Wire,
Yes.
who won a Doswell Award for the freedom of speech and but he is being penalized for reporting on Kashmir-based issues.
Yes.
A draconian case of sedition has been filed.
Yes. Yes.
But there are other journalists, it was named as Arnab Goswami, when cases have been filed on him for mere defamation, the Supreme Court, with great impetus, addresses his plea and very conveniently ignores the plea of migrant labor.
Yeah.
So what is the government favored news be called the journalism? Can the
What's the
government
question? I didn't get the question. What's the last thought?
So what the government favored news be called journalism?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. There will be certain news organizations that will have a pro-government stance. And it's up to the reader, up to the viewer to be able to discern that such and such news organization is very much pro-government. And do I need to take everything that they say, everything that they project, everything that they relay at face value? Can I take something with a pinch of salt? Indeed, I'm not saying to completely disregard them or disbelieve them, but it is indeed important for readers and viewers to be also self-aware and to realize that these power equations exist, that certain journalists, certain news organizations are close to the government, and indeed that would mean that for some excesses or some things that they shouldn't be doing, for them they are given a light treatment, whereas some journalists who actually do act like a watchdog, who actually do the journalist work of being critical, of questioning, then they are hounded. This is happening. It is true. And it is happening across the world. And it is up to the reader and the viewer also to be able to discern what is happening.
Okay, ma'am, we'll go with this last question, ma'am.
Yes, please.
So, do you think the layoffs will worsen, or
Why-
do you think that the layoffs in the media industry will worsen, or how long will it take for the revival of it? So then, I mean, maybe he must be a student. I'm sorry for the guess, whatever. But what will be the situation for the young journalist students who are being trained in the colleges now? Should a
Yeah.
new batch of students prefer electronic or social media? What?
Yeah, so I mean, it's the era where the difference between the publisher and the consumer has blurred. Everybody has a platform now. And the great meaning of the advent of the social media is a certain kind of democratization, right? So to be able to carve your own niche is something that is possible to young people, right? And indeed, sometimes when they are able to develop that kind of expertise, when they are able to showcase their talent and their knowledge about certain issues, even big channels, big news organizations approach them on their own. But then you should have been able to, sort of show it to the world that indeed you have that deep interest, that genuine interest in the field that you want to pursue. Do I think the layoffs will worsen? I think that might happen. What is the way out? Journalism will continue to stay relevant, but of course, these are hard times for journalists and news organizations. It is true. But that doesn't mean young people cannot have their own platforms, cannot do their own news gathering or sharing of views or finding out of new and relevant information and perspectives. They can all do that. Like I mentioned, the difference between the publisher and the consumer has. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. These are the questions that were posed by the participants. I personally thank you a lot for accepting our invitation, ma'am. I request Dr. Seema Ghosh to go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you, Shiva ma'am. Sorry, thank you, Shiva, and thank you, Anjali ma'am. Actually, in the beginning, we could not connect to our principal, Professor Y. Ashok. So now he is online. So I will ask Professor Y. Ashok, our principal, to say a few words.
Okay. Thank you.
Principal.
Am I visible? Or?
Yes, you are.
No,
Anjali, ma'am.
no, sir. Your video is off, sir.
Excuse me,
I
ma'am.
can see his video. I'm able to see his video.
There are two Ashok Yaskis.
Now, sir, you are visible now.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, Anjali, madam, thank you very much. It has been a very, very educative session, even for people like us, because we have hundreds of channels now and thousands and lakhs of journalists will be working on the field.
Yes.
And especially in this pandemic,
Yes.
that is Corona. I am sure the difficulties faced by the journalists are unimaginable.
Yes.
So they are doing a wonderful job. In spite of all the odds, they are doing a lot of excellent reporting.
Yes.
And fortunately, we also have a few journalists. One was working for Republic TV, one for TV9, one for TV5. So I keep listening from them also. And our present batch of mass communication students, a lot of them are budding journalists. And I am sure all the difficulties and challenges which you have posed should not deter them. It's an appeal to all the young students.
Yes.
It's not the journalism field only. Every field is now suffering because of layoffs and all that. It's a general slowdown of the world itself. So that will affect everyone, but passion is most important. And if you are definitely taking up the challenge, I'm sure you will be a very successful journalist.
Yes.
And on behalf of Bhavan Vivekananda College, Anjali madam, I take the opportunity to thank you for sparing your valuable time in this hot afternoon. And maybe it's a blessing. In the hot afternoon, you are keeping everyone at home.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much,
So
Professor.
thank you very much, Anjali madam. And And I really appreciate the efforts taken by Dr. Seema Ghosh and our young and dynamic budding journalist, Shiva Trishur, for doing a wonderful job, because it's not easy. Organizing a webinar, finding a good speaker, everything is difficult. But I'm sure you found a very, very befitting speaker for the occasion. So thank you all for everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, and excellent job, Seema Madam, Shiva, and thank you again.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes, so thank you from my side, sir. We, the Faculty of Arts of Bhavan Vivekananda College, would like to thank the speaker, Ms. Anjali Lal Gupta, for accepting our invitation. We would also like to thank each one of the participants for joining the webinar and making it as a grand success. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Dr. Seema. Thank you, Shiva, for inviting me.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am. You're welcome, ma'am.
Yes.
The participants, I think so, the feedback form has been posted in the chat box.
Yes, ma'am, we did. Yeah.
Yes, so please fill in, and accordingly within a day's time, you should be receiving the certificates,
Right,
participation
yeah.
certificates. Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am.
We can finish the session, ma'am. I mean,
Yes,
we can
yes,
leave the
yes.
exit.
Yes, Anjali ma'am, you can leave the session.